You're listening to a special episode of the Everything Life Coaching podcast, Coaching Mastery with Noelle Cordeau, CEO of Lumia. Explore transformative coaching concepts, tried and true methodologies, and powerful insights from the front lines of the professional coaching field. Whether you're an established coach seeking fresh perspectives or looking to begin your coach training education, welcome to your one-stop resource for all things life coaching. This is Coaching Mastery.
I'm Noelle. I am the head of Lumia Coaching. I am a PCC level coach. I've been coaching for 16 years. This event today is for students, alumni, members of our community who are thinking about becoming a coach. So we wanted to open up some of our coaching mastery sessions to our whole community because folks just benefit so deeply from some of the outside of the curriculum learning that takes place at Lumia. Today, what we are going to work on is building a practice outside of social media. The last time we were gathered, we had Jason Moss, who is a fantastic online marketing expert. And I wanted to address the other side of the coin, which is, do I have to post on social media in order to find clients? This is one of the most common questions that I get from students and alumni. And so I wanted to tackle it today because the short answer is no. There are lots and lots and lots of different ways to intersect with your ideal clients. And one of the ways is finding power through community. Now, community comes to us in lots of different forms. Community is a big part of what we do at Lumia. And so many of you have fallen in love with your colleagues through your cohort experiences or made new friends in office hours or Coaches Cafe. And one of the reasons that we drill down on the power of community, both in coach training and afterwards, is that success cannot be achieved alone. And the most successful people out there, me included, rely heavily on competent, like-minded, goal-oriented peers. And typically what this looks like are professional communities that provide support, feedback, generate new ideas, new ways of doing things that will also inspire you and keep you motivated. It's really easy to give up on your goals if you are doing it alone. So one of the things that we're going to do today is get really creative and start looking at opportunities for building both community and strategic partnerships right in your backyard. When you first strike out as a coach, there are two main pathways to building community and identifying strategic partnerships. If you're not sure which path is right for you, let's get into some clarifying questions. So first up, when we're thinking about community, they typically exist virtually and in person. So do you want to work in person or behind a computer? That's the first question. And I'm not talking about social media. I'm talking about being physically behind a computer to do your work. The way that I do most of my work with Lumia Coaching is behind a computer. And man, I do love working in person. And so for me, that's something that I'm considering is how can I bring more real life into my life? What do you like doing better? Talking or writing? Do you feel more comfortable expressing yourself verbally, or do you feel better on the written page? And sometimes we need to challenge ourselves to do a little bit in the buckets that we're not totally comfortable. But as a starting point, know yourself and play to your strengths. Another question that we want to get into is, do you want to stick to exactly where you live now, your community, 4 or 5 block radius, your neighborhood, or do you want to move around, move farther out as you work? Do you want to get on planes, trains? How far are you willing to drive for work? And then another question to consider is, how visible do you want to be online? How visible do you want to be in your personal community or in your online community? I'm a pretty great example of somebody who's very visible online, although I don't participate in social media, but I'm not very visible in my everyday community. As I walk around the city of Philadelphia, nobody knows who I am, and I kind of like it that way. So, as we're thinking about how to strike out into the world, both paths, whether we're thinking virtual or in person, are going to require us to become a detective and think about all of the different places where we can build community and intersect with our ideal clients in person and online. Up next, we have some examples to be thinking about how to do it if we're going to go the in-person route. So this is just a sampling of how we might want to think about intersecting with people and building community in our everyday lives. Spas, retreat and community centers, fitness centers, yoga studios, libraries, schools and universities, different meetup groups, your ICF regional chapters, wellness festivals and farmers markets, wellness centers, acupuncture clinics, therapy practices, coffee houses, local retail stores and outlets, or third spaces like parks. So as we're moving into getting our juices flowing, if everyone can just think for a couple of seconds about some of the places that you might pass in your everyday life. Are any of these striking a chord with you? Is this recognizable to any of you? Because every single one of these places on this list is a potential place where you can either network, build community, run coaching services, or gain visibility. Next, let's talk about how to do it. So, taking a look at this particular list, spas, retreat centers, fitness centers, yoga studios, wellness centers, and even acupuncture clinics or some similar adjacent practice. Taking a look at this list, some of the things that all of these places have in common is that they all have owners. Every single business has an owner, and many businesses of this sort have community engagement personnel. There is someone who works at a spa or a retreat center or a fitness center that's in charge of partnerships and programming. Each of these places pays rent on a facility. And pro tip, if you're thinking about approaching a partner to offer a pop-up or an educational seminar or to host a networking event, is that people who own facilities like this would love to be able to make money hosting something when there are no services being offered in that space. So that's big, huge pro tip number one, is what does that look like if a space itself is not being utilized? So this could be after hours at a spa or a yoga studio, or this could even be someplace like, Kimberly mentioned coming in, a YMCA that has a lot of different rooms available at all times, but they might not be utilized at all times. And so when we're thinking about this, we're looking at these places strategically and saying, okay, every single one of these places needs to pay rent. Every single one of these places is trying to sell more and different services to the same people. So my question for you is, looking at this list, are any of these in your area? If so, can you give them a call and find out who the community and or event and or partnership coordinator is? Do you have something that would be of interest to their population? And you might be saying, well, how do I know what's of interest to the population? This is where we have to talk to people and find out who typically comes to your spa, who typically comes to your yoga studio. What is your common demographic like? And from there, we'd be able to figure out who the people are, what the pain points are, and to suss out if our coaching offerings are a good match for folks who might populate these spaces. Also looking at this list, something that's coming to mind for me are co-working spaces, private social clubs, things where there might be more professionally oriented activities for folks to dive into. Another thing that all of these places have in common is that every single owner of an entity like this has an email list that they can advertise your services to. So whether you're saying to the owner of a spa, hey, if you want to send out an inclusion about my services, I'll not only offer a discount to your members, but I'll give you an affiliate payment if anybody signs up for my group coaching. Or I'd like to offer a pop-up seminar or workshop. If you email it out to your list and anyone from your list comes, I'll give you an affiliate thank you as a gift. Now, let's take a look at this next list of all of the different things that they might have in common. Here we have libraries, schools and universities, meetup groups, your local ICF chapters, wellness festivals or farmers markets, therapy practices themselves, coffee houses, local retail spaces like physical stores, and third spaces like parks. Taking a look at this list, some of the things that all of these places have in common is that they all offer opportunities for networking, visibility, discovery, and referral partnerships. So my question for you to get the juices flowing are, could you advertise or host a group coaching session or an educational experience at a library or a local university? Most universities have an Office of Student Life or a career center that's interested in bringing in new programming. Meetup groups and ICF chapters are also absolutely wonderful outlets for networking and getting your name out. Joining your ICF chapter, letting fellow coaches know who you are and what you coach on can open up a referral pipeline. Likewise, joining a meetup group of your target population and showing up not as a coach, but as a friend. And then slowly, as you get to know folks and build trust, let people know that this is what you do. You support this particular population. You're literally getting your name out there in your community to people who can pass it along or work with you themselves. Wellness festivals and farmer markets tend to be seasonal. And all of these places and spaces have vendor applications where you can table to gain exposure. Back in the day, we did this at different Wanderlust festivals, and it was incredible for our coaches to have boots on the ground experience. And we went the vendor route. We paid for a table at Wanderlust as a vendor to gain exposure. Likewise, many of our students have found success simply by posting flyers in local coffee shops or sitting at a table with a free life coaching sign. One especially enterprising student who's here today approached the owner of a local retail space and pitched an evening of coaching for the store clientele. And that resulted in exposure and sales for the owner of that shop. Many of our students have also found success approaching local therapy practices who would like to have an ICF credentialed coach on staff to take on a ready client pipeline. And this isn't just therapy practices. This is also doctor's offices. And every therapy practice or doctor's office has a clinical director or has a coordinator of some sort that brings in new talent to that practice. The owners of the practice are typically an email away, and you can always call and find out who you might need to connect with in order to make that connection. It does require picking up the phone, writing cold emails, and maybe even walking in to say hello if you're local to a certain place. Another place that I'm going to recommend is parks. I was walking in Philadelphia last summer, and there were two women. They were at a park bench, and they had a huge sign that said free dating advice. And there was a line of men, 10 deep, who were sitting there to speak to those ladies. So if you live in a busy city and there's a park bench in a high traffic area and you put a free life coaching sign out, I expect that you would have a decent amount of traffic coming to you. And the commonality here is that you have to talk to people. So a lot of us have been struggling to build our social muscles after the pandemic. This is a great way in low stakes environments, public parks, coffee houses, doing some cold calling to start building your muscles with moving back out into the village and interacting with people, which is why we're becoming coaches in the first place, is because we really love people and we believe in people and we believe in the power of transformation. And sometimes we can take that as our North Star to get out of our heads and really just start having the conversations that make things possible for us. Another natural aspect of coaching is that, so here we are. What if you're one of the folks who wants to stay behind a computer but aren't a social media buff? And here we're looking at examples of virtual outlets for intersecting with community and your ideal client. And what all of these spaces and places have in common is that they foster sharing information and community building online. So when you're working the in-person route, you're going to be focused on understanding the population, building relationships, and having conversations. When you're working the virtual route, you're going to be focused on understanding the populations, building relationships, and providing content and value. So we're looking at Slack groups, Discord groups, Facebook groups, blogs, Reddit forums, websites, and podcasts. Please note that none of this involves posting on social media or posting on your personal social media account. This is a workaround for those of us who want to be involved online, but do not want to be producing content in a content generating, content calendar based way for a social media platform. So when we're thinking about how to work the virtual space, the first thing that we want to consider with an online presence is, what do you want to do there? Do you want to join a community or do you want to build a community? Are you trying to capture content information to build a sales funnel, or are you trying to create content for the public or for a select group of people? Or do you want to do all of the above and build a personal brand? When you're thinking about joining a community like a Slack group for working moms or a Facebook group for folks who are newly divorced, what do we need to be thinking about? And what are the benefits and what are some of the cons? So number one, when we join a community of people who are established, they're part of a certain population, they're self-identifying. Number one, awesome. We have found our people. And number two, we're probably going to find some role models along the way. There's a built-in audience of like-minded people in all of these different groups, and they're ripe for networking. The cons is that when you are participating in online groups and you're showing up consistently, you're being helpful, you're sharing content, you're sharing information, you're sharing tips and tools of the trade, you're creating visibility for yourself. This takes a lot of time to be consistent, to follow up, to follow through, and to make sure that the information that you're sharing is also consistent in terms of its value. It's a slow build to create a client pipeline this way, because first you need to build trust and gain trust from the people around you. It's very different from being at the park and holding up a sign that says free life coaching. That's effective. Everybody knows why you're there. There's no pretense. But in an online group of new working moms, you're going to need to really check your ego at the door and be open to learning and be open to participating shoulder to shoulder with folks for a good long while before you begin to introduce the concepts of your services. A con here, just to be aware of, especially in the online space, is that other people can be tricky. And so, one of the things that I learned early on in my career is don't read the comments. But when you're in a group that is a community or a forum, you might need to build a little bit of a thicker skin as far as feedback goes, because a lot of times people will shoot from the hip, especially if they're raw or they're having a bad day and everybody's protected from being on the other side of these weird little grass greens that we inhabit. So, food for thought. If you are thinking about not joining a community, but building your own online community, that's wonderful. You can create your own Slack group. You can create your own Facebook group. The pros are that your people will find you. And these are really fast outlets of communication with a curated audience. Everybody knows why they're there. It's a great platform to sell from. There's a lot of networking that can take place. Some of the cons, again, you will need to be consistent, persistent, and prolific. When it is your platform itself, you are responsible for driving the engagement, the questions, the thoughts, the cadence, the communication that goes out. So thinking about the people you're engaging with, who are they? What are their needs? Who will you be to them? And how will you hold yourself accountable for the follow through that's needed? And I think the bigger question is, how will you truly help? How will you truly be able to help people? That's something that I thought about early on as well with Lumia Coaching, is because I sell a coach training program and we have an amazing community. And when I started, my decision was, I really want to educate the whole world about the work of coaching. It's not just about Lumia as a coach training program, but it's truly about educating people about the power of coaching and also giving coaches really good information like the content that we're delivering today to help uplift all of the helpers. And when that became my why, it wasn't about me. It was about being of service to a specific population of people who need help, because the world needs more helpers. And that is how I was able to kind of get over my own fear of being public and my own fear of engaging on online community space. If you're thinking about creating a sales funnel from this work, this means that you're going to be setting up interactions in a way that people will give you their contact information, and then you'll need to follow up and follow through with outreach and marketing. A newsletter is a really fantastic way to do this. So if you're setting up a community and you're going to be drawing in people to you, one of the things that I want you to think about ahead of time is, what are we going to do with these people? What kind of information are we going to give them? I like to ask folks to consider loading the cannon, putting together 4 to 5, 6 pieces of content ahead of time so that you have 6 months worth of content to send out to anybody who comes into your sphere or your world. Some other things that you're going to want to consider if you're moving into working in a virtual space is silencing yourself from time to time, being aware of the relationship that you might have to dopamine, taking breaks. And as you are engaging in online spaces in a world that is increasingly combative and complex, how are we as coaches to remain responsible and objective? All right. So from here, this is what I would like you to try at home. We're going to kick it off today. This will live in the student portal for those of you who are students and alumni of Lumia, so you can come back and revisit it at any time. But what I'd like you to do maybe tonight, tomorrow, over the weekend, is sit down with a pencil and paper and make a list of every single outlet that you can think of that you might be able to approach with either an offering of, hey, did you ever consider having coaching at your facility? or an educational experience of, hey, I can do this pop-up education on XYZ topic. Would that fit your client population? And thinking about the different needs of the folks in your community for speaking, teaching, live coaching, or even just to gather information about the needs. That would be a wonderful reason to sit down and have a conversation with the head of a client membership at a gym or client membership at a YMCA, or to approach the different studios, even librarians, and say, hey, who comes in here and what are their needs? Same deal with colleges and universities. Next, we're going to ask you to do the very same thing with your virtual habits. Make a list of all of the places that you gravitate towards naturally. Get curious and expand your horizons. I bet you there's a Facebook group or some other virtual community for every single niche that you have ever wanted to work in. And you can join them and simply begin to engage in the conversation. If nothing else, you will learn so much about the pain points of your ideal client, and you'll be able to speak to them more readily when you're actually ready for a pitch. And you'll have new friends and ready-made contacts when you're ready to share the news of your coaching certification. And the same goes for publications, podcasts, and all different other kinds of content production. In order to chart a plan of attack, you first have to know who's out there and what's out there. Whose voices do you admire the most and where do they exist? Again, role models are a great way to begin noticing how you might like to engage in the world. So use this exercise to begin the process of simply noticing, and don't feel that you have to tackle everything all at once. Starting with the places and spaces that are the most familiar and accessible to you is a great place to start. And very small steps that are taken with care and intention will take you a long, long, long way. One of my favorites, Albert Ellis, developed the concept of emotional interval training, where you push out of your comfort zone for very brief periods of time, and then you pull back in. So maybe that might look like spending a half hour at the park on a busy Saturday with a free life coaching sign and then folding it up and putting it away. And hey, you put yourself out there. Or that might look like emailing one director of a therapy practice in your area to see if they've ever thought of bringing on an ICF credentialed coach, and then packing it up and moving on with your week. If you do one thing every week, you'll begin compiling resources, compiling options, and compiling your network. You only get to be at the starting line once, and it is a very joyful time. So I encourage you to also pay attention to your energy, what gives you energy, and then also what detracts. And as you're bumping around out in the world and you have questions, bring them back to our collective. Ask your colleagues on Slack for their perspectives. Come see me in office hours. Go to Coach's Cafe. We are all here to help each other.
Thanks for listening to Everything Life Coaching. If you're feeling the draw to become a coach, head to lumiacoaching.com/everything. Explore a new career that brings fulfillment, gives you a true sense of purpose, and a bold community to do it with.
Lumia is ready to equip you with the tools, training, and community you will need to reach your goals. If you're ready to build a unique coaching business on your own terms while making an impact on the world at large, Lumia is the next bold step in your coaching journey. That's lumiacoaching.com/everything.
And hey, if you're waiting for a sign, this is it.